What's up YouTube? My name is TheLazyTryhard and today we are going to be starting a new tutorial series like I promised, and this one is going to be over Android app development, not to be confused with Android game development. And to do this we're going to be using Android Studio, which if you go to the web is Android Studio. It should be the first one that comes up, and you need to download that, install it, and everything. If you want to find a YouTube video, that's great. Usually I do the installation as it is and kind of walk you guys through it, but I think it's pretty standard. You kind of just go through all of it, and if you don't have the SDK, that might be your only problem in updating all of that. So once you install it and everything works, you should get this screen. And again, the reasoning behind this is I think you guys are competent enough to do it yourselves, one, and two, I don't want to, I have a finite amount of time, and I kind of want to get through as much as I can with you guys. So what you're going to want to do is once you open this, you're not going to have this match it file or anything like that, but if you have a bunch of errors or something that comes up whenever, go to the Android SDK manager, and this is kind of going to manage everything, so it makes sure that you have all your stuff. So make sure you have all of these and at least have 4.4.2 because that's the latest version, so you can use that version of Android in your development. So without further ado, we're just going to get started, and I'm going to kind of walk you guys through the basics of how to look at this project and how to interact with this project. So what you're going to want to do is go to File, make a new project, and we're just going to call this LazyTryhard. That's my name. And we're just going to call it tutorial. And you're going to keep the module app, and actually just go to the underscore. I don't like that. And location, you can save it to wherever. Do whatever you want. I'll just do it in my Dropbox because I could use it whenever. And target, when it asks for the minimum required SDK, target SDK, minimum is what you wanted to, so the oldest version you want to update to. So API 1.0 is when Android first came out, but 4.4 is what they're at now. Normally you want to, normally it'll change. You'll kind of just have to be coding, and then it'll say, oh, what you're trying to do is only allowed in API 9 or 10, so then you're going to have to update it. So when that happens, we'll do it. So just leave it at 2.2 for now, and then obviously the target is going to be the most contemporary or the most up-to-date version. And language level, just do 6.0, and then the theme. This is kind of interesting, but for right now, you can have a dark theme, which is kind of everything's going to be mostly dark. Light is going to be the same way, and then the dark action bar, we're just going to leave it at none for right now. And when it asks to create a custom launch bar, that's if you want to create an icon that's not one of the specific ones, which is yes for us, but right now we're just going to keep it unchecked because I don't know if we're actually going to be able to export this. And you're going to have support modes, and it's basically just going to say if you want all these certain libraries, kind of like the extensions in libgdx. And right now we're not going to worry about any of that. We're just going to kind of go through it and without that stuff. So next is going to ask you for if you want a blank activity, full activity, or master detail flow. Most basic is blank activity. We're going to work with that for right now. And next is going to ask for your activity name. So this is when it says main activity, this is the Java file that it's going to create, and it's basically going to interact with everything that you do, which I'm going to explain in a second. I'm going to explain what a layout is and what an activity is and what you kind of do with that. And then for additional features, we'll go into it later on, but that's kind of just if you want, to scroll, if you want click on these tabs and goes over, stuff like that. So we're going to finish that. And you guys are probably going to be really intimidated. I was very intimidated the first time I saw this, but it's really not that hard to understand if you know how to work with Java, and if you worked with libgdx, anything like that. It shouldn't be that hard, but you get all these red lines, and you'll be like, oh shoot, what am I doing wrong already? You're not doing anything wrong. If that was the case, it'd be awful. but it's going to Gradle and it's making sure that all your stuff is good. So it pulls up to this whole screen. Oh my gosh, we're going to break it down, don't worry. So we're just going to go to the very top, and again, do not worry about Gradle, do not worry about idea or .idea, just worry about this app thing. So when you have a tutorial like this, you have these very important elements of it. So the idea is important, but it doesn't really deal with anything. I've never really worked with it. And the Gradle is if you want to like add libraries and stuff, which we're not worried about right now. We're still trying to learn all this fun stuff. So what you're going to want to do is go to your source. Now, like libgdx, this is kind of where all this stuff takes place. You have your Java files, which basically it makes your pages or your layouts interactable, and then you have your actual pages. So if you go to res, this is where kind of all the layouts, like I said, were. So these first four are kind of where these drawables are basically what images are. So they're going to be PNGs, basically where you put all your assets. Like in libgdx, where we had the images, we put them in a separate folder, not with the Java files. So we have 4 folders here because it deals with different resolutions. You have, like, for the smaller screens, you'll put HDPI, and then for the bigger ones, you'll use, like, for like tablets, you'll use XXHDPI. So that's just if you want to deal with resolutions and stuff, which I'm not going to cover right now. Next, you're going to have your layouts. This is the most important component of. Excuse me. This is like the second most / it shares the importance with the Java files. But if we click on this, again, don't be scared. But it pulls up the XML. XML, again, you can work with it. It's like HTML if you haven't worked with it before. But if you're really visually oriented or visually inclined, then you should just work with this. If you ever worked with NetBeans before and you've seen the Java Swing library, it's kind of the same thing. So on your left, you have all your different tools that you can use in order to design your app. You have plain text, which if you drag it over, and this is how it really works, you drag it over, it creates a new text. And then if we want to change that text, we have to go into this properties, and this properties has a bunch of different properties that we can change, but the two that we really want to deal with are ID, because this is how we're going to access that in the Java files. And if we change this, it's not going to do anything. We can do that and the text stays the same. But if we go to the text, which is somewhere, it is right there. My name is TheLazyTryhard. This will actually change it. But again, you see that like we have all these different arrows that are like telling us to do all this different stuff. But if you're really visually oriented, again, I think it'd be good to do what I'm about to do, or at least learn how to do it at a very basic level. But if you're very visually oriented, I'll show you guys how it works in that. So again, you can have a button, you can have a radio button, you can put whatever the frick you want in here. Image view is also like an image, but you have to like obviously put an image in there. So I'm not even going to go over what that does. But you have all these different tools that you can use in creating your Android application. And I'm going to explain them in the next couple tutorials, but for now, just know that if you click the XML page, you'll get this kind of, okay, I'm just going to put that somewhere. If you click the XML, you're going to get this layout. And don't be afraid by all this. This component tree also kind of, it just helps you sort all of it. So if you want to put things in certain layouts and certain orders, that's how you would do it. But again, I'm going to focus that on a different tutorial. And again, don't be afraid here, guys. I'm going to go to the text. Oh gosh. For those of you who are more programmatically inclined, like myself, but I work both ways, point being. But this is what the XML looks like. So if you, let's see here, you have this relative layout, which is basically the backbone of everything that's formatted here. you can have a bunch of different layouts that kind of format your widgets in a bunch of different ways that I'm not going to cover right now, but I'll cover in a later tutorial. But you also, then you go into all of these. So if you worked with HTML before, or if you haven't, you have this bracket. Everything in here is enclosed because you see the relative layout ends here and it starts here. And you see that by this. And everything that's in this relative layout is going to be formatted by it. So this text view is right here. These are all the components of it. So the basic components are Android layout width. If you want to, there's only 3 settings for this. You could do fill parent, which would basically extend it across the board. You see that it doesn't actually fill it all up, but if we continue to add text, it would continue to go. Fill parent basically just like it stretches it to the edges of the screen. And if you did that for height, it would be awful because it would just kill everything else that is on the screen. So normally you want to do wrap content because it'll wrap it around anything that you're already doing. Next is the actual text. Android : text equals. So as you've kind of seen before, that's kind of how you deal with text and all that. And the ID is also what's kind of important when we're going to the Java side, when we're going to the programming side, which I'm going to explain in a second. But it's important that we kind of make this good, or a name that we remember. So we're just going to call this identity. Or usually what I do is I do TV because text view, and then that'll kind of designate it as saying this is a text view, which will make it a lot easier for me. And then identity. So the rest of these aren't really that important, like margins. That's just kind of for spacing, and I don't know why it decided to go here. But I'm just going to delete that, and hopefully that shouldn't change anything. Alright, whatever. So you have the same thing with buttons, layout width, layout height, the text. If you want to change the text to a button, this is my button. It'll do that. And pretty much a lot of these, if you kind of just work with it a little bit, it should kind of come to you a little quickly, and it should be awesome. But right now, I'm just trying to get you guys through the basics of all this. So if you delete, say, this text view from the XML, it'll also go away in the actual thing. So it's kind of nice that you have the visual over here, but you also have the code over here, which is very nice. So again, that's a very broad overview of what an activity main is. This is kind of what will run when you start the application, because this is the first thing that comes up unless you change it, which we're not going to worry about. So we're going to close that out, and for the menus and values and stuff like that, again, do not worry about all that. I'll go into that with more detail. Menus really just kind of are like smaller widgets, or like bigger widgets. They're kind of ones that you create yourself and that you want to put in. For values, it's like if you want to have a certain dimension for your XML document. So like you can't put a variable in an XML. So this is where you would put them, and you can access them. So say you wanted to like make all of your buttons a certain height, you'd like do dimen name equals button. What do we say? Button width. So if you want to make all your button widths the same, then it'd be, you'd say 16 dp, which is kind of like the way you do it. And I totally messed this up because you're supposed to have you're supposed to have a closing bracket right there, and it should all work. So button width, invalid resource name. All right, fine. My button width. There. Happy? Okay, awesome. So then you could access that in your layout, and it could be all your buttons could be the same height because you would make that variable. And the same goes for strings. If you want to have a certain string in your thing, it'll just, you do it here as well. So if you want TheLazyTryhard, that's the name of the actual the actual application when we open it, and the hello world's the same. So again, we'll deal with those in later tutorials, but they're basically just variables that you can use in the XML. So finally, styles, don't worry about that. That's kind of just like what style do you want to have in your Android application. So we've kind of finished up everything in the res, hopefully. Oh gosh, wow, this is going on very long. I'm sorry, guys. I'm trying to explain this as quickly and as efficiently as possible. Now, finally, the Androidmanifest.xml. This is the one thing you do not want to screw up. This is basically everything your app is in terms of like it all bundles together, and these are like the attributes that it has. This is application, activity, and all of this stuff. So this is where you would kind of say what your required SDK is, API level, stuff like that, and where you would put all your activities in if you created a new one, which we won't be doing until at least 3 or 4 tutorials away. But just know that like this is where the Android, like this is where your app is named, where your activities are, what your icon is, and stuff like that. So this is very important stuff. We're not going to deal with it right now, but just know right away, do not mess with this at all, because you could kind of screw up your application. Not to scare you, but just to be safe. And then finally, the main activity.java. This is where all of our programming goes in. So if you go to like the main activity, we have this cute little design, and we can run it, and you can have a button. I'm just going to move this down here. You can have a button, but it doesn't do anything. You can have all these labels, and you can make this the most gorgeous app in the world, but it won't do anything because there's no Java behind it. So that's where this comes in. This deals with all of your interactions with it. So if you're thinking like HTML, think like JavaScript, how that kind of like adds like the interactions. It deals with all that stuff. So if you click this button, Java can handle it. So we have to kind of merge all of our widgets in this activity into this, which I'll deal with in the next tutorial actually. But basically just know that this Java gives this XML flavor, and the way that they're linked together is through this line of code: set content view r.layout.activity main. So this is the name of this, and don't worry so much about the R and the layout, but if you wanted to just do it r.layout. And it gives you all of these, and you're like, oh my gosh, what do I do? Just do activity main. So if you make any more layouts, like say we made a new layout resource file, we're just going to call it new layout, and it gives us this, and it's a completely new layout. We could access it here as well, so new layout, and it would reference this layout. So now all the Java would be dealing with this layout as opposed to this layout. So that's what that does. What else? So I'm going to also explain kind of what each of these methods do, and hopefully that'll be it for this one. But so your protected void on create method, this deals with everything that is initialized. So kind of in libgdx when you're initializing all your variables and stuff like that, this is what the onCreate method does. It kind of sets up the Android application in order to really give it some life and give it some flavor. So if you wanted to say set the title bar, or set the title, so right now it's TheLazyTryhard, we can set it to the new title, and we could run it and it would work perfectly. Title, I hit shift, dang it. And we could do all this stuff. So we set up everything. So if we wanted to access our button, and don't worry about it or what all of it is, if we want to access, let's not do button, let's do text view. Text view t equals get, I'm trying to remember all of it, get by, never mind. Basically what you would want to do is you'd kind of want to set up everything in terms of like If you want to add a listener to your button, like we do in libgdx, you do it here. If you wanted to change text, if you wanted to access any variables that you already have stored, you do it in the Java. Next, you kind of, like, all these methods are kind of the same in terms of they all have the same function. On create options menu deals with creating the option menu, so it would inflate this menu, which basically means it would just, add it to the action bar, and you can kind of go through this. But they all, again, basically set up the project in terms of the Java programming. So, I know that's a lot. I'm going to break it down a lot more in the upcoming tutorials. I just thought I would kind of give you guys a quick overview of everything there is to know about the Android setup and Android applications. So in the next tutorial, we're going to be going over some of the smaller components, more specifically in this brilliant thing called Android Studio. So thank you so much for watching and listening to me for 21 minutes and 8 seconds. I really do appreciate it. So thank you so much for watching. Please rate, subscribe, comment if this video helped you / informed you / whatever, and I will see you guys in the next video.